Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comfort Enclosure. Today's episode focuses on an innovative approach to afterlife care, Terramation or human composting. I'm thrilled to welcome Micah Truman, founder and CEO of Return Home, a pioneering company in the field of Terramation. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Terramation is an eco-friendly alternative to traditional burial and cremation methods. It transforms human remains into nutrient-rich soil. Welcome, Micah, and thank you so much for being here.
An honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you start and share with us what inspired you to start Return Home and focus on Terramation?
In 2018, Washington, as some of you know, was the first place in the world to legalize Terramation. The laws were beginning to be tabled and discussed by our legislature, and the news articles began to come out talking about it. And I was sitting with my mother, I guess, when I first heard about it, and I was like, Ma, this is crazy. And she said, no, it's not. And she had two buddies with her from New York, and they're like, they're her age in their 70s, early 80s. And they were saying, get our bodies here. If it can't be there, it better be here. So that began the thought in my head. And then, as you know, it kind of sticks with you. And I was very focused on building a company that the bigger it got, the better off the world was for it. And this was without question the best idea I saw. The only twist was it was dealing with our dead. And that was not something I'd had experience with. And it became its own journey, I guess.
Well, can you explain in detail how Terramation works? I'm sure many people are unfamiliar.
Sure. Well, I should do a little bit of history and then go to sort of what happened with us in terms of our process. So the actual scientific methodology behind composting a body, any body, is very mature. It's an industry actually that's largely in agriculture, and it's called mortality composting. So it's out there, it's huge. So, last year we lost millions and millions of chickens through avian flu, as an example. I want to say 80 or 90% of our chickens in Washington State, and I'm sure across the country, were composted. So this isn't something we talk about, but is done on a massive scale with bodies, though of course not human, all over the world and certainly in the United States. So when I began, I heard about this industry and I called these folks, the various folks that do it, and it was a eureka moment. It was like, oh my goodness, nothing to it. So let's go. And they were like, great, we'll take the bodies and we'll stack them in a pyramid-ish, ziggurat-ish formation and cover it with chicken poop and a thick layer of sawdust, run some oxygen air through it, and let's go, and I was like, how about we don't? And so what we realized was we had incredibly mature, dialed science that was proven on scale, but utterly inappropriate for humans. And so the science was really interesting. It wasn't about figuring out the science of transforming a body. It was about porting across the science that already existed, being done in a very different way, and making it capable of giving the care and love to another human being that previously hadn't been there. And so that involved horrible inefficiencies, as some of the scientists were thinking, right? Yeah, we chose an in-vessel system, and they built this system for us. Our scientist, the guy that we work with, is phenomenal. His name is John Paul, and he's a PhD soil scientist and mortality composter out of Canada, and he's a marvel. Anyway, so we designed an in-vessel system, so an individual body is placed in a single vessel. We use something called what we call organics, which is alfalfa, straw, and sawdust in a mix. We place a base layer of organics at the bottom of the vessel. The body goes on top of that, and then the remaining organics go wrapped around the body, kind of cocooning the body. The microbes in our body, the things that transform the food we eat into energy, are also hardwired to transform us. So we have these barriers in our body. Our bloodstream is very separate from the microbes, for example, in our gut. And of course, should they break down, there's a terrible risk to our health. But it's amazing. The moment we die, those barriers break down almost instantaneously. It's like the gates open and the body's flooded with microbes. And the microbes are very active and they begin the transformation process. It's why on our earth, we're not littered with bodies. We're built to transform. So what happens is, right, microbes love a couple things. They like heat and they like moisture and they like oxygen. And so if you give them a lot of those materials, they will obviously become super active. Think of it like a blacksmith's fire, right? Feed the fire oxygen. And of course, you can take something that can melt steel. So we do the same, except we do it with the microbial process. With about a fifth of a hairdryer of air running into our vessel, we are, able to take a body up to about 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is getting near oven temperature. We don't want it that hot. It's a long story behind it. Let's not worry about it. We'll try to drop that temperature somewhat to about 140. And the body in about a month, little over, will completely transform into soil. Bones remain, which we reduce just like they do in cremation. Like ash that you get from a crematorium is not ash, it's ground bone. We too reduce bone. We grind bone into 1/8 inch shards. Bones are weird. They're super, super hard on the outside and ultra porous on the inside. So the moment that they're fragmented and reintroduced to the soil, the microbes absolutely transform bone as well. So after that first phase, we transform, or I should say grind the bones into small fragments. Those are then reintroduced into the soil. It sits in a cube, no longer in a vessel because there's no person there anymore. And they transform the remaining bone, cools down because it's unbelievably hot. And a month later, for 2.5 months total, we then have soil that we can give back to the family. We bag it in burlap. It took us a long time to learn that. Burlap is natural and it's breathable. We have an instinct sometimes to wrap things in plastic and place them in the cupboard. And in the case of living soil, that would be ill-advised. And so burlap allows for the bag to breathe and the soil to continue its journey and go back to the family. It's a lot of soil. It's about 250 pounds of soil. About 60% of our families take all of it. The rest take some portion of it. A very few people take none of it, but not a lot. And like I could probably count on one hand. And ultimately, they can break it into as many bags as they wish. Any amount they don't want will be distributed. And at our woodland, which we own, I bought an 8-acre parcel about 15 minutes from here and scattered at no additional charge to the family. And then people do all kinds of stuff with that. And we can talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm very curious, what do people usually do with the burlap bags that they receive?
Yeah, so the last while, the one that sticks to my mind is a mom lost her child and her child loved bees. So they broke it up into 100 small bags and gave it to all the children at her service and asked them to plant something that would feed the bees. That was my favorite. Had another one where a family, he was sort of the old patriarch of the family, and they planted a tree break in front of their house. There are people who love flowers and certain plants. We had one that completely reseeded a cut down stretch of trees near a salmon run. So we're really only limited to our own imagination in regards to what we use. We can place it most anywhere cremated remains can be placed, except that cremated remains might not be as helpful. Yes.
How does terramation compare environmentally to traditional burial and cremation methods?
Yeah. We should probably get into the two dispositions that are most common, right? We have cremation and we have burial. Burial involves taking a body, incinerating it, 1,500 degrees, 30 gallons of fuel, 550 pounds of CO2 blown into the air. And those are always the normal stats that everybody gives. But actually, well, those were the points that I used to always give. But, it's actually really not the point. The real point is another human being has to do that. And I think what we find is we almost never talk about the people. Did you ever see the movie Blazing Saddles?
It's been a while, yes.
Me too. Right? So there's an African-American cowboy and a plow, and they are stuck in deep quicksand, right? So the guy's up to his armpits, and he's in need of help. Plow's not yelling because it's a plow. And the guys run up to the side, and they see that they're there. And they're like, oh, no, we got a problem, right? And they grab the rope, and you know what they do? They pull the plow. out of the quicksand. I feel that's what is done to the funeral industry. We will sit, I used to sit all the time and talk about all the terrible things that the things we do in the funeral industry affects the earth. And we never one time talk about what it means for one human being to have to do some of the things that we require. To cremate somebody means you have to put them in an incinerator. You have to adjust their body with a metal hook under an open flame. If there's a lot of body fat, it's going to have to melt down, and you're going to have to deal with that. If you're busy, you might have to do 6 in a given day. It's very hot, without belaboring the obvious. And so if it's summer, you're going to be hot beyond your wildest dreams. Do you have eyelashes? Not for long. I remember sitting at a speech and we were talking, and it was interesting because everyone was getting it was always the usual, tell me about why cremation's bad for the earth. And I went, hey, has anyone here cremated somebody? And there was a woman in the back who raised her hand. I said, would you mind telling me? I don't mean to pry, but could you tell me about that? And she burst into tears. We don't pay attention to that. Now I want to move quickly into what burial entails. Burial entails taking a body, draining the blood out of it, typically dumping it down a sink, filling the body with formaldehyde, with embalming fluid, placing that body in a casket. You should know that the more expensive the casket, the more sealed the casket is. I was trying to figure it out. Like if you walk into a showroom in a funeral home, they're all real shiny. So I'm like, ooh, they're all nice. Why is that one 12,000 and this one 2,000? And it's all about sealant. How gasketed is it? The top ones are capable, and they're proud of it, of burping. So we have a really interesting situation in which we have defined quality as the ability for us to keep us separate from the earth. All of this ultimately, right? You get in your gasketed coffin. That coffin is placed in a hole in the ground. That hole is lined with cement and rebar. So, chemical-filled body, gasketed, casket, cement and rebar lined hole. And boy, it is resilient. I think you got a couple hundred years in you. But of course, in the grand sweep of things, the Earth's got as much time as it needs. So if it needs a century or 1,000 years or a millennia, bring it on. I want to loop back. But again, the cost of doing this, and I do mean the actual cost to the family, it runs incredibly expensive. And again, other human beings have to do these things, and these are hard. So in the case of cremation, I think our process runs about 90% lower in energy output. What's hard to measure, and I've got to get my propeller, my propeller heads to give me a little more depth. It's going to take actually a big study. It's not just the inputs for cremation that are important, because we run 90% less. What are the outputs? And those too need to be measured. So in the case of cremation, that's as useful to the earth as a bucket full of sand. And what we give restarts the cycle of life. So it's not just what you put in to get it, it's what you get out and what you can do with it. And that actually, I don't know how to measure, but it's interesting, right? Because our soil grows plants at unbelievable speeds, and cremated remains are charged carbon. So yeah, I would argue with great conviction that what we have might be a better solution for the earth. And I think it's kind of good for our people.
I would agree. How do families typically respond to the idea of terramation?
Well, that's an interesting question. Remember, we always talk to our families once they've drunk the Kool-Aid, once they have gotten themselves to a point at which this is something they're willing to discuss. When we talk to your average layperson, and I'm sure you have what we define as the cuckoo bird moment, right? That pregnant pause, what do you do? It was my son's 8th grade graduation, right? And the nice lady sitting next to me, and she says, what do you do? And I said, I'm on pump, right? I'm like, I compost human bodies. Like we just started, and she moved not one, but like 3 pews back, So I think a lot of people early, it takes some adjusting. But if you think about it, right, if cremation wasn't common or accepted and people asked you what you did and you were working in that industry, you'd say, I incinerate bodies, right? And if they didn't know about burial that way, right, I dig holes and I put a liner in it and I put a box in there, right? So it all sounds a little wild unless you're used to it. But that's not where we get our families. We get our families often when they're quite farther down the line. And it's not that they don't love what we do. I think many of them are really excited. But what they don't understand, and neither did I when we started, is what you really can do. So what we're talking about is, of course, people are like, yes, I want to go back to the earth. I want to go back gently. That's something they often say. They say, I'm afraid of fire. I don't want to be incinerated. Legit. I don't want to be locked in a coffin and put underground. I'm terrified I'll open my eyes and I'm stuck there. Legit, right? The reasons of our heart are there, and those are great. But there's another part, and I saw this as a person who hadn't been with our dead before, and I was older when it happened, which is at return home, you are able to say goodbye to a person in a way our society has not seen. Most of our cultures, the vast majority, not us, not our parents, not our great parents, great grandparents, or the generation before them. And it's been so long that we have that in our bones, but we don't even know how to talk about it. And we can get into it, but it's an ability to say goodbye in a way we never believed possible. And you should know, when I opened Return Home, I didn't know it was possible either. I just got lucky because what we do allows for it. And that became its own journey.
When you talk about that, I'm assuming that there's some type of memorialization that people are able to partake in or take part in. Are people able to really take and individualize that?
It's not that people walk in and go, I'm unique and I'm going to be individual. They're going to go, my daughter was 17 and she took her life, and I feel a really big need to put her in that vessel with my hands. And you go, okay, all right. I need to sit next to my son's vessel. I need to do it every single day. I'm going to bring pictures. I'm going to stick it on my son's vessel. Sometimes I'm going to change those pictures. It's Thanksgiving and I really don't care. I want to come in your door today and I need to sit there. So it's not like people come in, it's like I used to, it's not like Bridezilla, right? I want the most beautiful wedding ever. I want to be, I'm Cinderella today. It's not that. It's like, I got these things. I need them. And they're really beautiful, right? Because it's not that they're being mean or rude. It's just that for a little period of time, every bit of extra is stripped away from them. And all they give you are the things that allow them to continue. And that's nice, right? That's instructions we can hear. And then it simply becomes a question of, can we accommodate it? And that becomes unspeakably powerful. Unbelievable.
And I'm sure that really affects their grieving process also, compared to traditional methods.
Yes, I think the thing that's been the biggest learning to me is to realize that we've been taught that a dead body is toxic waste and can only be handled by a professional. 150 years ago, our person went on a table and everyone cleaned her, and some guy was out back putting together a pine box, and there was a tree over there where they were going. It was eminently tangible, and it was not a thing that filled people with fear. I believed that too. But if you think about it carefully, the dead don't give us COVID, the living do. Transmittable diseases don't come from the dead, they come from the living. I'm worried about people sneezing, not about someone who's died transmitting something, right? So if you think about it rationally, you're like, holy cow, we've been fed a bill of goods. But the challenge then is, if people see that that's not possible, they don't walk in and go, I have a dream, I'm going to do this. They're like, I'm in agony. I can hardly separate oxygen from carbon dioxide. And so what we do, that's a lie. What Katie and Bree do is take them through a set of questions, right? And we developed them over time because we didn't know. Okay, would you like to be with us help us bathe your person, right? Hell no, I don't. No, I do not want that. That's good. Next day, phone call comes in. I want to stand next to you while you do that. Okay, that's great. And then like, get out of my way. This is my person, you can step aside. And so what we find is that we have a certain set of things that we want, but it's not like we're just going to stand there and sing it, but it's our job then to present it. And it's incredible because we're taught by our parents and our grandparents, but our parents and grandparents have lived in a void this way as well. They have nothing to teach us. And that's so unspeakably sad.
Yep.
And so it's our chance to offer that. And so it happens.
Yeah, well, we've no good role models, right, for how to die or what means, the after death care of a body. All we see is what we see on TV, what we see, in the movies, and so there is that loss, that our great grandparents had, some of our great grandparents, right, or even before that. So,
Right.
so it is that learning and that education. So how do you, besides for having people come in, I know that you do outreach. How do you educate people about this option and what are some of the misconceptions that you encounter?
So when we first started our facility, it cost a few $1 million to build. And I had never worked in this industry and I'd never worked in a direct to consumer industry. And I think like so many people trying new things in death care, I opened my doors with a big smile and a clean shirt and waited for people to come in the door. And then we had cockroach races in the back under the desks. You know what I mean? Like no one's coming in.
Yes.
How could there be no one coming in for the most beautiful facility you've ever seen in your life? Don't you know? And so I was talking to my buddy, a really amazing marketer, and he went, all right, so what did you spend on your space? And I was like, a lot of $1 million. He goes, oh, okay, that's great. Because that means you have a great marketing budget, right? Because our rule is it's every dollar you build with, you have $1 for marketing for. How much budget you got for marketing? And I go, $25,000. So I was a child playing a grown-ups game in a major way. But it's even harder than that for us. And I think you'd understand. It's not just that we're a tiny company that then needs to make the world know about our company. It's that we're making the world know about something that doesn't exist. If I'm opening up a coffee shop, all right, it's hard. I got a lot of coffee shops against me, but everyone drinks coffee. They know the possibilities. They know what to order. Here, no one has a clue. So social media became a monster for us. We've built some really good channels. I think we got 750,000 people following us on TikTok. We have a lot on Instagram. We've just got real strength, and we had to do that on our own because no one else knew how to do it. Not for a funeral home, right? Because if you do a funeral home ad, it goes, hello, today I am Micah and I am the CEO, and I want you to know that love flows through everything we do. Not only that, we're sanitary. Which obviously elicits a scream and flee response in me or anyone else who listens to it. And in order to be followed, in order to say something that people want to listen to, it's got to have content that's interesting. And that's why no one in the funeral industry ever does it. Because to say something besides platitudes means someone might not like you. And that's scary because the rule is we're to be water. Everyone's to like us. And our decision is, no, they don't. No, they don't at all. Here's how we believe to see the world. We laugh, we make jokes. We got skeletons in chairs sometimes because my funeral directors like them. I don't. Off-color jokes, really sad things that I think are too sad for people to see. Really goofy things that I think are too goofy for people to see. Basically, my team has a response that if I'm really, really freaked out by something, it's probably going to be good. And so we do it. We also try to tell stories because people are narrative by nature, where we live by stories. So if Katie, I walk into a room and I see Katie, because she always does, right? She has a tradition where she always reads to the little ones. She always reads them a story before we put them in vessel. And I could hear her from behind a room, and I walked in and there she was, And so I filmed Katie reading a story. Of course, you can't film the person. That's not what you can do. But I didn't, if you look at Katie and you see her doing that, you also realize that she pays a price for these things too. And it tells a very human story. What a funeral home wants to do is to say, our guys are fantastic, cheerful, efficient, and lovely. And I want you to see Katie's face and realize she's got a real hard hour ahead of her, and she's very generous. So that's the kind of thing that people want to see. Do I put that up there and do I feel fair? Like, hell yes, I do. If anyone says anything bad about Katie, that hurts me. And they do. But you have to be willing to tell that story. And to do that, you have to face fear. And at 52 years old, my fears are tangible, and my instinct to hide is substantial. And there are fighters and there are runners, and I am a runner. And I am the CEO, which means all I have to do is say no. So it's required some internal adjustment.
Sounds like.
Yes.
Let's talk cultural religious practices. Has any religious organization or any cultural organization reached out to you? Because I'm curious, how does Terramation fit into these different beliefs and how?
Sure. Before we get to religion, and I will touch it, let's just talk about humans. And let's talk about business. Humans, we surround ourselves with the familiar. I assume my ancestors were in a cave and they knew what to eat because the other stuff was bad. They knew what would eat them because they'd seen it, right? So you get used to a certain set of rules, and it probably bodes well if you abide by them. But we live in a society now where the rules change so quickly that that's hard. But we hold on, right? We try. So in the beginning, when we went out, presenting to the funeral industry, presenting to conventions, yeah, it was nice of him though, in a way. You know, you'd be sitting next to some old dude and he's a third generation funeral director, and he'd go, I think you're disgusting. And I go, damn, because I think I'm really, really sweet. You know, I'm really nice. But what I appreciate about that is the honesty of that. I far prefer that to a profession or group of people that would sit there, smile, and then have me walk out of the room and say I'm disgusting. So at least I could see it. The reason I'm talking about people before I talk about religion is made up of people, and the people are human and full of fear and subject to the same problems of adjusting to a rapidly changing world. Our priests, our rabbis, they're people too. They're as full of fear as the next guy. They might be as unknowledgeable about what goes on in our profession as the next guy, but they make the rules. And that's a very interesting thing to look at. What we've discovered is that religion is no problem at all, with the exception of doctrinaire religion. So I had a bee in my bonnet. I thought it was going to be these guys or those guys. It's actually not true. Catholics, many of them come to us all the time. We've had priests in here doing ceremonies repeatedly, right? But a very doctrinaire Catholic might have trouble, because if it's absolutely the letter of the law as it comes from the Pope, it might not be 100% clear. I'm Jewish. I had a service here last week in Hebrew. It was beautiful. Are the Hasids going to come here? No, the Hasids are not going to come here. So what you see is this spectrum, right, of which we have people of a faith, but it's on that far side that I think we see some resistance. The Catholic Church, they came out with a paper on us and said that it was forbidden. So that came out from the Catholic diocese. It's an absolute no. And now, but look at me. I have a habit of making a monolith out of people. So I'm like, oh, I get it. The Catholics are doing that. Well, I'm mad and I'm not going to take it, right? Well, I've got Pablo Metz coming in from Berlin for Terracon in a couple of weeks. And he is a guy that started the company in Germany. The Catholic Church loves Pablo. The Catholic Church has just published a piece out there saying it far exceeds and is better than cremation, and they recommend it. So I'm no longer willing to silo any one group, because every time I do it, I'm like, holy cow, it ain't like that. What's been interesting to me, I end up talking to a lot of people, and as time passes, I find myself talking to people a little higher up the chain. And you realize that they might not know some of the things. So you'll be talking to someone and they'll say, I think the problem with you guys is you don't have dignity. You don't show dignity to these people. And I'm like, ooh. what's dignity? And then we have a who farted moment, and we realize he doesn't know what dignity is. He hasn't thought about it. He's not saying it's not dignity. He's saying he's scared. He's saying he doesn't understand. He's saying he doesn't know how to go forward because his past, which told him what he was supposed to do, doesn't instruct him to his present, in which he's given something different. And dignity is the word we use to just go, no mas. Could we not? Let's watch the Seahawks. The other thing that they don't always come to grips with is there'll be principles that folks will stick very closely to. Often they will fall back on non-separation of the body. And if you want something sacred, welcome to our world. I care bigly. And they'll say, well, that's why we like burial so much, because it allows for the placement of a body untouched. And I go, great, I'm all on board, because I'll do it. Like, I can disagree with you, but be consistent with me. All I need is consistency. Start with your basic premise, carry it all the way through, show me that you can follow all the way through, and I'll go, I disagree with you, but I follow. I'm not the smartest guy, I'm not the stupidest. And I'll go, okay, great. So burial's fine because it doesn't separate the body. Yep, that's why we love it. And I'll be, okay. Embalming, how we doing? And they'll be like, yeah, embalming's great. And I'll go, so they're going to dump that person's blood down a sink and fill it with formaldehyde. Problems? And you'll look at their face and you'll go, holy cow, guess what? He didn't know that the blood goes down a sink. He didn't know. And the reason he didn't know is he was just like me. I never sat in a room and watched those people. I'm not trying to make a division and going, look at that stupid guy. I'm saying, look at that guy who didn't know anything. It reminds me of me. I was that. And you realize that suddenly the thing he thought was true is not true at all, but he has to format and abide by the things he was told. And that hurts. And I think that's really interesting to see so it's a huge journey. And they are afraid of death as much as we are. They are as avoidant of it as we are. They have never set foot in a prep room, just like we haven't. And then they make decisions, and the difference is they make the rules. And so if we can educate, reach that handout, maybe we can change things.
Terramation is only legal in 8 states. How can people become advocates for Terramation in their state?
This is going to sound weird. You know, Gandhi did a great one. I loved it. He goes, I have 3 problems. The first problem I have are the Indian people, a more obstinate group I've never met. He said, but I think we can work on that. And he goes, the second are the British. He goes, they're not the fastest. We got it. We can totally fix this. I think we could deal with the British. And he goes, and for the third, my biggest problem is Mahatma K. Gandhi. And with him, I have no recourse. And I kind of think of it along the lines of what you were just describing to me. When I think about religion, oh, is it hard? Dude, it's hard. Manageable, totally manageable. Easier than religion is government, much easier up that pantheon. And that's shocking to me. 7, 8 states already legalized, 4 more going. We've only been at the game 2 years. These guys are ripping through the place, and they are moving extremely quickly. And I think I know why. If I'm a politician who's straight, anti-gay, and voting hard, it's not my world. I can do what I want. I can avoid the things I don't want to see. It's not mine. It's somebody else's, and I don't like it. You want to know the great equalizer? Death. Ain't getting out of it. Sorry, Representative. Looks like you and I are chained to the same cockpit. Let's get it, Big Stack. And so suddenly you realize these people must face the same realities. So whereas, let's go back to my, gay example, maybe they haven't known somebody that was out. They probably knew a bunch, but they didn't get told. And so they don't have to deal with it. But how many human beings sit there, and I don't care who you are, rich, poor, and of course our politicians who went, I was in that funeral home, I was in that situation, I remember it at 7 years old, and I cannot leave the heartbreak behind. And that is a universal. And so these dudes, dudettes, peoples sit on their, sit to vote, and they remember these things. And that's why when we're getting these votes through, they're passing by a landslide. So I thought this was going to be a Caucasian, middle-ish, upper middle-ish class citified tree hugger Subaru driver play. And I was right, kinda. It's true. I resemble that remark. But we have people from all over the place coming to us, and their reasons are profoundly different. A farmer across our state who is no Democrat, it's been in his land, his land has been owned by his family for 100 years, for 4 generations. He doesn't want anyone to tell him what he's going to do. He's going to go back to his land on his terms, anywhere he wants. Thank you. Well, guess who represents them? Republican politicians on the east side of the state. So politicians we see absolutely sweeping. And we're going to see legislation go at rates that will be staggering. And we're going to see majorities that pass at incredibly large numbers. It's not getting the politicians to vote. It's getting the vote to the politicians. And so what we're often seeing is the vote's about to go onto the floor and it gets shut down. And it's very non-transparent. So if you look onto the government sites, you'll see, oh, it was tabled. I can't remember what it's called. It goes beep, boop, beep, beep. And suddenly it goes, oops, removed, eligible for revote next year, next session. And that's opaque, intentionally so. And there are the powers that be, whoever they are, that might shut that down. If it goes to the legislatures, I don't care if it's Oklahoma, Florida, New York, they'll vote it in. And that, by the by, is crackers. And unbelievably true.
You talk about, people just being people. I know that since starting in the death care industry, my views on life and death, of course, have been altered and have changed. How has working in the field of terramation and in death care affected your personal views of life and death?
So for me, right, the last 2.5 years have been the most transformative years for me of my life. I've been very lucky. I worked in finance. I was shielded from so much reality. I feel like I lived in a parallel universe. I was looking back at the first newspaper interview that I gave, and I said that we were, quote, a carbon capture play. I don't think I'm a liar. I'd have felt better if I was. What's that Mike Tysonism? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So it's very easy to have a theory, right? And here was my theory. I know how to run businesses and I can build them big. It's a skill that I have. In a world that is consuming things at ever increasing rates, and there's only so many things to consume, endless growth quarter on quarter is suicide. I don't care what political stripe you are. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If we have X amount of forest and we remove the forest, there's no forest, that's not good. Do you disagree? I would hope not. That strikes me as logical. So my original state was, let's see if we can build a company that the bigger it gets, the better off the world is for it. No BS, right? There are great companies that pretend they're environmental. Well, good company, garbage for environmentalism. One of them's wrong. There are fantastic companies that hand knit scarves in a developing nation using fair trade llamas. A beautiful thing, a passionate thing, legit. A garbage business, God bless you all, I'm sorry, but it's not going to grow to something big. And the thing is if we want to affect change, that was mean of me. Let me try it again. It's not a garbage business. It's a business that cannot change the world on scale because it can't get enough momentum. So you must create a business that can, if that's what we want to use to affect change. And with this, that was my idea. We are burning our dead. We are blowing everything into the air. We need to change that. We need an environmental alternative. It's very exciting because this is so scaled, right? We don't need to take a survey. We're gonna die. How about it? Right? This is not toasters. It's not like we're about to go buy some stuff. What I hadn't faced was a 31-year-old wife who lost her wife, who's the first person who comes to us. And I was destroyed. I cried for 6 straight months, and I'm a 50-year-old man. we are not accustomed, me and my invisible twin Skippy, I am not accustomed to doing and behaving like that. And in my old world, that was unacceptable. And you're not going to last long if you do that. But I cried for 6 months. It made perfect sense to cry for 6 months. My God, I'd never seen this. I'd never seen this. I'd never seen a family like that. I'd never seen people who died and various things like that. I'd never seen the vulnerability like that. And so back to Mike Tyson, I just taken my shot to the face, and the punches kept coming. I was beat the hell up, and that put a change. That put a huge change in me, and that changed the way I thought about myself. It made me realize that all the things that I was doing, I thought I was mad or sad or this or that. I was none of them. I was afraid. I was afraid. And all of that. And I'm an old dog to have to learn these tricks. But how is it that you then redefine all the things you thought were normal and realize actually you're just acting scared? And then how do you face that and change? You can't change your fear, but you can change your response to fear. And you can change it first by defining it. I name you fear, you bastard. And then we go forward. And again, those were unbelievable. It's been a heck of a journey.
Well, Micah, thank you so much for being so open and honest. I really love how authentic you are. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for your time today. I've learned a lot. If our listeners want to learn more about Return Home or get in touch with you, how can they?
Yes, very easy. Our URL is returnhome.com. Our number is 206-888-4663, which is home, 206-888-HOME. Come check us out. Our socials are all over the place, and I'm sure you'll see them. May I put one little plug in?
Please.
We care for children at no cost under 18. It's our privilege to help. We know it's a very difficult time. I don't know how long we can do that on the scale we're doing it, but we do it so much. There'll be a point at which we can't take everybody, but right now we can. So if you or people you love are in need, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Very, very generous. Folks, today's episode has shown us that there are a number of ways, some familiar and some not, for us to honor our loved ones in their passing. Terramation, as we've learned from Micah, offers a unique, eco-friendly approach, allowing us to give back to the earth, even as we cherish the memory of those who have meant so much to us. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comfort Enclosure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.